Okay, so today's discussion is about kind of like an entire area of Torah study that is often misunderstood, and it's important not only to know what it is and how to learn it, but also to kind of learn it, because the lessons contained within this form of Torah instruction could be very critical. Now, we have the words of Maimonides when he talks about the people and their attitudes towards agadic Talmud. Now, when we use the term agadita or agadic, that's the Aramaic word, which means it's the Talmud that deals with philosophy, with ethics, with morals, with everything that's not straight up law. It's everything that's more about behavior and philosophy, kind of things that you should understand or behave. And there's a marked difference between the method or the modality of instruction in the Agadita versus the law, wherein the Agadita is always presented in the form of stories, parables, metaphors, euphemisms, little one-liners and if you read it at face value, message is never being conveyed. As an example, if y'all remember, I gave a class here about a year ago on a Talmud that reads that as follows: that there's three things are a measure of the world to come. Who remembers what they are? What are the three things that are a measure of the world to come?
Torah.
No, not Torah. Not Torah. No. Three things are a measure of the world to come. Nope. Three things are a measure of the world to come. So no one remembers.
Like Shabbat was one.
Shabbat was one. The sun is another one.
Mm-hmm. And the mystery word.
And the mystery word, which Talmud ended up saying it means going to the bathroom. Thus, the Talmud says this world to come, this one wonderful end goal of spiritual endeavors, it's comparable to three things in this world: the mitzvah of Shabbos, the sun, the celestial being that we have, right? That's 93 million miles away, and going to the bathroom. That's it. That's what the Talmud says. That's the instruction.
What was the last thing?
Going to the bathroom. Using the restroom. Huh?
It was a good class.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, going to the bathroom. That's it. Now, when I read that Talmud first, I thought maybe I was missing something. Like, that's the beginning and that's the end. And there's no explanation. There's no footnotes. There's nothing that says, oh, let me explain this to you, what the lesson is actually being conveyed. Now, I spent many months trying to figure it out, and I found in many other places these ideas being referenced, and I put all the puzzle pieces together, well, at least not all, what I thought to be a lot of puzzle pieces together, and what it turns out that this particular piece of Talmud is saying fantastic lessons, wonderful lessons, and the insights could guide us really in how we approach some very crucial elements of our life. So that's an example of a agadic statement having to be interpreted because it's masked in the form of a parable or an example or a story, etc. I found another one. This is yesterday. Another one that says as follows. And by the way, these are starters. I don't know where it goes from this. So I found in the Talmud yesterday, it says as follows. It says there's three keys that are only in the hands of the Almighty. There's other keys that the Almighty gives out, and there's three keys that are in the hands of the Almighty. Number one, for livelihood. There's no angel, there's no spiritual force in charge of that department. Only the Almighty. Number two, for having children, for the miracle of life. And number three, for reviving dead people. These are the three keys that are in the Almighty's hands, and no one else has it. As opposed to the rest of the keys, the rest of all the wonderful things in the world, they may be in the hands of intermediaries, proxies. It looks like if you look at Genesis, God tells Abraham that those who bless you will be blessed, which is interpreted to mean that Abraham now is kind of a he's an opinion with regards to blessing. Thus, if you bless the Jewish people, well, then by nature, by dint of that, you'll be blessed as well. But these three things are exclusively in the hands of the Almighty. Okay, so what are the three things? Livelihood, having children, and reviving the dead. We're good. Okay. What does that mean? I don't know. But then I thought about it a little bit. This is yesterday afternoon, and by the way, I don't have any conclusions. This is just my thoughts. I thought about it, and I remembered that the Talmud, elsewhere, in an entirely other end of the Talmud, says, and this may be particularly relevant to you, Steve, it says, what does a person need to do and become wealthy? What does a person need to do and become wealthy? And it gives instructions. You do a lot of business, you do business ethically, and then you pray. Those two things means you do your own personal effort, plus you pray. Okay, that's what the Talmud says. Fantastic. What does a person need to do, the next thing the Talmud says, and have male sons? Male sons. Okay, I guess you prefer to have, I don't know, maybe.
As opposed to female sons.
That's what it says. So what does a person need to do to have male sons? And it describes, it's kind of a little section education from the Talmud, whatever. We'll skip that part. Check it out yourself. It's in Talmud in Nita 71a. 70b to 71a. It says marry who he's supposed to marry and what he's supposed to do. Oh, and pray. And the last line says, what does a person do and become become a Torah scholar? And it says you study a lot of Torah, you don't spend so much time doing other things, and you pray. So three things it talks about. Number one, how to have livelihood. Number two, how to have male sons. And number three, how to become wise in Torah. And all three of them it says to pray. And I was thinking that maybe these three things are parallels. That livelihood. How do you become wealthy? Well, livelihood. That's the key of the Almighty. I.e., the prayer is the way to compel the Almighty to use that key. The prayer is how we intercede on behalf of the Almighty to use that key. Of course, if we just pray and don't do anything about it, well then it's not going to help. You can't just say, you know what, well, the Almighty has a key, I'm just sitting and praying. That's it. I'm not going to get a job, I'm not going to do anything. Wait for the money to descend in a parachute in my backyard. That doesn't work. You can't do one without the other. Similarly, we said that another key is in the hand of the Almighty, and that is having children. So here it says, well, male sons. Okay, whatever. But that's the same idea, that you do what you need to do, plus you pray. Thus, the prayer is interceding on behalf of the Almighty to use that key. And lastly, I was thinking that maybe when it says to revive the dead, maybe when someone becomes a Torah scholar, there's a certain measure, a certain element of enlivening someone. How do I say that?
It's not literal.
Well, I think it could be literal. I think it for sure could be literal, of course. And the commentators talk about.
God can't give any human the power.
Well, we do find with Elisha in the Bible, Elisha and Elio and Elijah, they both revived the children. And there's another Talmud elsewhere that talks about Elijah swapping keys, which is very bizarre. Because Elijah himself, he revived the dead. Well, how did he revive the dead if it's the Almighty's key? Well, the Almighty gave him that key. Fine. But then there was another story where he prayed that it should rain in order to make the roads so sloppy that people wouldn't go to commit idolatry. So then God says to him, okay, I have 3 keys, and I'm going to give you 2 of them. Well, it doesn't make sense that you should have 2 and I should have only 1. So Elijah says, okay, we'll swap. So he gave him the one for the rain, which is the livelihood, and then he got the one for reviving the dead, which is, pretty interesting. But I was thinking that maybe, we talk about Torah study as being not just about acquiring knowledge, but it's life for the soul. The soul that doesn't have Torah, the Torah is compared to water, Emayim el Torah. The Torah is compared to oxygen, like Rabbi Eliezer said. The Torah in the Bible itself is compared to bread, right? If you just have bread, could you live? No, you have to have Torah as well. Right? We're told again that Torah, it is our life. So there's an element of Torah infusing someone with life. So maybe when it says that how does someone acquire Torah via study and hard work and not focusing on other things, plus prayer, once again, there's another way to unlock the third key that is reviving the dead. This is like a little stub, I call it a little stub. Like you go Wikipedia, this article is a stub. This is a stub. Like this is an idea of keys and warehouses and unlocking. It's a very intriguing idea, and I'm sure there's a lot with it. But that's what I was thinking. That's a stub. I don't know where it will go. Where maybe it will, maybe it won't. Maybe it will percolate into something more substantive. But that's just an idea. So that's how we kind of go about approaching studying this kind of Talmud. So today I picked a piece of Talmud in the book of Taanis. Taanis means a fast day. We know that in the Jewish calendar there's 6 fast days. 2 of them are like big time fast days, and 4 of them are minor fast days. So 2 major and 4 minor. The 2 major, of course, are Yom Kippur, as we all know, and Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of Av. And the 4 minor ones are the fast of Gedalia, the 10th of Teves, the Taanis Esther, the day before Purim, and the 17th of Tammuz. But that's the book what the book talks about. That's the content matter of the book. But in page 20 and 20a, we find the following teaching. Now we're going to read it, and it's going to sound very strange, I assure you. And we're all going to have a lot of questions. And I assume someone's going to say this is wrong. What's happening here is wrong. And we're going to try to address it and ask all those important questions and critically analyze it and see if there's some sort of lesson that we could take, or maybe we could just put it as another stub. Who knows? We'll make a little stub hub for our stubs. So,
Stub. Too expensive.
So the Talmud starts off with the following instruction: a person should always be soft like a reed and not stiff like a cedar. Okay, and then tells us this great story about Rabbi Eliezer. So there was a story with Rabbi Eliezer, the son of Rabbi Shimon, who was coming from Migdal Gedor, from the house of his rabbi. So he was traveling. And he was riding on a donkey. And he was traveling on the edge of a river. And he was exceedingly happy. And he was feeling aloof because he had studied much Torah. The translation is mine, so don't overthink about the translation. But the content is, okay, we have a rabbi, a great rabbi, Rabbi Eliezer. We'll learn more about him, maybe. We'll see some stories about him. A great hero. The son of Rabbi Shimon, also Rabbi Shimon, a very, very pivotal figure in the early 2nd century. And he's traveling, and he's going from this town called Migdal Gedor, and he's coming from his rabbi's house, fantastic, and he was on a donkey, a lot of details, and he's at the edge of the river, wonderful, and he was super happy, and he was feeling a little bit, full of himself, or a little bit aloof, because he studied a lot of Torah. Okay, and what happened? He chanced upon a man who was very ugly. So you meet someone who's super ugly. Okay. The man said to him, "Peace be upon you, my teacher." So the ugly man, greets him and says, "Oh, this famous rabbi who's on the donkey, who's traveling. Shalom Aleichem, how are you? Peace be unto you." So what did Rabbi Eliezer do? Rabbi Eliezer did not respond. Instead, he said, "Empty one. How ugly is that person?" He's like, "Dude, why? You're so ugly." So he tells him. He calls him empty one, which, by the way, in Talmudic lingo is the worst insult is to call someone an empty one. Because what does it mean someone is empty? It means they're empty. They got nothing. And in Rebbe Eliezer's vernacular, empty means empty from wisdom, empty from, it doesn't mean that they're, what does it mean empty? They're a vessel that's empty, right? And just think about that idea. What could be? How can a person be empty?
Empty of valve.
Yeah, but how can it be empty? It means that it could be full, right?
Why is he equating ugly with empty?
Well, who says he is?
Well, according up to now.
Well, he calls him an empty person, and he's also an ugly. Maybe it's both, or maybe it's one. I don't know. You tell me.
Well, how does he know? He just sees him. How does he know he's empty?
I don't know.
Well, we'll continue.
He's insulting him, where you said empty is an insult.
Yes, empty is an insult,
Here's
and
this famous rabbi. How would he treat this poor guy?
I don't know, man. These are good
You
questions.
know, you meet people by their dress or something.
would make
Probably
him
the
empty.
guy was not radiating wisdom. So it can
He's
be.
certainly violating the Jewish principle of being kind.
So it would seem like.
Empty means food.
Yeah, but empty also means, what's the opposite of being empty?
Full.
Full.
So that means that humans are either empty or full, or somewhere in between, which is an interesting definition. It means if
You can be full of evil or full of
Full
kindness.
of shit.
okay.
Full of spirituality, that's what this
Okay.
guy was talking about right here.
Yes. Well, it seems like he's a fool, but it's clearly an insult. And then he tells him also, you're empty and you're also ugly. And then he says to him, perhaps all the people in your city are this ugly. He says to him, maybe you come from an ugly city, everyone's just super ugly. So he answers, I don't know. Rather go and tell the craftsman who made me how ugly is this vessel that you made. So he comes back with the best zinger.
Socked it to him.
And he says, oh, you know what? Go to the craftsman who made me and then tell him, why'd you make something so ugly? And obviously, who's the craftsman that made them? It's the Almighty. And Rabbi Eliezer says, he realized, oh goodness, I just insulted the Almighty kind of, because I insulted the vessel that the Almighty made. Once he realized that he had sinned, he descended from his donkey. Once again, we find out more details about this donkey, okay, and prostrated himself before him and said, please forgive me. He realized he made a mistake, clearly, and he asked for forgiveness. The person responded, I will not forgive you until you go to the craftsman who made me and tell him how ugly is the vessel you made. So he's not willing to budge. So Rabbi Eliezer followed him until they arrived at his city. So he's trying to tell him, forgive me. No, he's following him. The people of the city went out to greet him. So they see the great rabbi, Rabbi Eliezer, who, by the way, we'll find out more details about him, an astonishing personality. And they all come out, they see the rabbi coming. And he's walking next to this donkey, following this super ugly guy. And he's talking to him, and they say, oh, let's greet the rabbi. So they all go out, and they greet him, and they say, peace be unto you, Rebbe, Master. They're so excited to see him. And the ugly man says, wait a minute. To whom are you calling Rebbe? Who are you calling Rabbi? Who are you according so much honor to? So they said, the guy was walking behind you. He said, if this is a rabbi, may there not be like him in Israel. Because if this is what you mean by saying a rabbi, people shouldn't be like him. This is not what we're looking forward to. The people of the city inquired, why not? Like, why are you saying something about the Rabbi Eliezer? So he recounted the entire story. He told him the whole episode, that he called him ugly and whatnot. So the people persisted and said, despite this, forgive him because he's great in Torah. So yes, he made a mistake, but forgive him nonetheless. He said, for you I will forgive him, provided that he does not regulate himself in behaving such. I'll forgive him, but not because of him, because of you guys. But only if he stops acting like that. Rabbi Eliezer immediately entered the house of study and taught. A person should always be soft like a reed and not stiff like a cedar. And therefore a reed merited that a quill is made from it to write Torah scrolls, Tefillin and Mezuzahs. Thus concludes the Talmud.
So they're saying you should forgive.
They're saying, well, he did forgive, and then Rabbi Eliezer comes with this, means he teaches this lesson as a result of this story. A person should always be soft like a reed, not stiff like a cedar, and therefore, when you want to write a Torah scroll, you need to have a quill. Well, how do you make a quill? Out of a reed. Fantastic. And then use this reed to write Torah scrolls, to write tefillin, to write all the things that we use to make mitzvahs. Fantastic. Thus concludes the Talmud. And you read it, and of course there's some questions. The obvious question is, what's the most obvious question?
This is not typical of a famous rabbi to
You
say
wouldn't
that
think
kind
so.
of thing.
Yeah. You wouldn't think so.
Yeah,
Someone
this
that
is
lies
like
would act like
totally out of character.
So it seems, right? It seems like it's, especially if someone he did study a lot of Torah. That's not that much was not up for debate.
Right.
Clearly, he studied a lot of Torah. This is one of the names that we see again and again, ubiquitous across the Talmud.
Yeah.
Fantastic personality, and he seems to be very rude. No, is that a fair assessment?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, he's stuffed with arrogance,
Arrogant,
holier than
boy.
thou.
Well, it says that he was a little bit aloof. It says it very clearly that he was a little bit aloof,
I
and
think a
about what he writes.
Seems like he lost it for a minute.
That what? He writes.
Think about what he writes.
Can happen to any of us.
Yes. His true feelings
Have an
came
opinion,
out.
but then think about it again to be sure it's right.
And what's interesting is to point out is that Rabbi Eliezer realized that he sinned. Means he realized he took the lesson, which is admirable. Means despite the fact that it seems a very negative reflection of his character, but on the other hand, once he realized that he sinned, and everyone sins, he started to try to repent, and he followed the guy, and he persisted, and after he was granted forgiveness, he taught us an enduring lesson for all time. And he said, I was stiff like a cedar, and that's why I sinned, and that's why it's important for me to be soft like a reed. And then he had this insight that says, oh, that's why Torah scrolls are written from that. Because to tell you that even before you write a Torah scroll, even before you delve into Torah study, it's important to realize that what writes this? What is the tool that we use for this? A reed. And what's a reed? Very soft, very easygoing, very wavy. Not stiff.
But I still don't understand this parable with regard to reed and cedar. Why you shouldn't be stiff?
Well, I think
What does stiff means in this?
Stiff, like
in this-
stiff-necked.
No, I know what it means in this context.
but I
Should
was,
you be steadfast in your studying of Torah and your beliefs?
Don't be
This is
arrogant, that's
characteristic.
what it
No, man,
Yeah,
arrogance,
I-
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it means Vitaly's saying, wait a
Don't
minute.
be
So
holier than
someone be
thou.
wishy-washy? Wishy-washy doesn't sound good, right?
Yeah, steadfastness.
Could be a
steadfastness.
foreshadowing of what Teddy Roosevelt said, walk softly but carry
Yeah,
base.
but
yeah. Well, I was
He
thinking
took that from
being
somebody
He
else.
had Navy. Teddy Roosevelt had the Navy.
It
I
came
was-
before him.
He had the Navy.
I was thinking being soft
Who
would
originally
be
said
being
that? I can't
humble,
look it
be
Wasn't
gentle
Teddy?
with people, be gentle with
Wasn't
people.
He said it,
Don't
but I
be
think he got it from
rough,
somebody
crude,
way back, like
crass.
Cicero or one
That
of those.
seems like, yeah.
You know,
I'm gonna look it up.
You know,
Before my time.
Right, but I think there's a difference between being resolute, and having strong, morals and beliefs, and resolute I think is a good thing, no? While maybe being stubborn or arrogant or obnoxious is maybe the other side of the coin, where it's stiff and not willing to accept anyone else. It means the guy was clearly ugly. Now, what ugly means is up for interpretation. Does it mean that he was physically ugly? Does it mean that he was spiritual ugly? Maybe that's linked to the empty. He was empty. He didn't have Torah. He didn't have actions. He didn't have midos. He didn't have something.
But he didn't know that, or he could know that what he could see, so probably he was ugly physically. Obviously, this ugly guy was not that empty
But he didn't have
because
kind
He taught him a lesson.
yeah.
But he wasn't
So he wasn't
ugly
that empty.
in the evil sense, probably. I mean,
Well,
if
not
you-
evil, but maybe empty. Maybe empty
Well, 'cause
in
he said
itself
peace
is
be
devoid
upon
of beauty.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the initial thing he says to the rabbi is, peace be upon you, like Noel said, which is not a sign of someone
He's kind.
who's respecting the Torah teacher, which means he can't be that empty.
Yeah.
He was smart enough to see value in you.
Comes from West
Yeah,
Africa.
so that's
He
telling me it's
picked
a
it up from
physical,
West
it's
Africa.
something physically is
But
not.
you don't have an individual.
Yeah,
Says
I
here,
think that's
Teddy,
probably the
in
simplest
Georgia,
understanding.
the dairy exploits of
On a surface level, I'm willing to argue that what Rabbi Eliezer saw was more spiritual. But let's put that on the side. Let's start from the
Maybe
beginning
like
here.
a sin or something that he had.
Yeah. Let's start from the beginning here. So we're telling the story of Eliezer, the son of Rabbi Shimon. So the name Rabbi Shimon, does that ring a bell to anyone?
It was in-
yeah, we just don't remember how.
Rabbi Shimon,
We
Rabbi
talked
Shimon Bar
about-
Yochai. Anyone remembers that name? Rabbi Shimon.
Only that he was the
Sounds-
father of Eliezer.
Does everyone sees my garish beard?
Yeah, it looks like
Omer.
it's grown a little bit.
Yes.
You can't
So the
shave.
Omer, there's
you can't
there's a
shave.
custom
Till
not to
33rd day.
shave till the 33rd day of the Omer. Today's day
Right.
22.
Yeah.
So we're counting. 22, yes. Now, on day 33 of the Omer, so that's when it stops these restrictions. What happened to day 33 of the Omer? So two things happened. Number one, the students of Rabbi Akiva seized dying. There was some sort of plague, and that many of the students of Rabbi Akiva, the great personality, they died. And then they stopped dying on the 33rd day. But also, it's the yard site It's the anniversary of the death of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon is, according to Jewish tradition, the author of the Zohar, which I have never read. But Zohar is the book of Jewish mysticism.
I read
And
one page, I didn't understand a word of it.
oh yeah, and that's in Aramaic. That would help you. But that Zohar,
In English, I read it.
You're going
Yeah.
to come back here.
Wait, Yehuda Berg said in the
Should have
Zohar,
said Sanskrit.
don't try to understand the Zohar for the sake of understanding. I'm reading that, and when I get to a point where it's telling me, I just drop it. You can't sit there.
Madonna reads
You call
it too.
Madonna or Demi Moore to ask,
So Zohar and Kabbalah is
Yeah.
the same thing?
no, Zohar is the flagship book of Kabbalah. That's like the
What, Zohar is what?
Kabbalah is the field of study, and Zohar is the original book, so to speak. It was never meant to be publicized. That's clear.
So it's like Das Kapital and communism, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's like Das Kapital. Yeah.
did you refuse to
It's like
read
Das
it, or-
Kapital and communism. Sort of like, well,
Well, I was gonna say the analogy is Zohar is like the Torah, whereas the Kabbalah is the Talmud, right?
well, no. Kabbalah is the field or the method of study. The word Kabbalah. What does the word Kabbalah mean?
To know.
No. To receive, that's right. Why is that? Because Kabbalah is meant to be is the last frontier of the oral Torah, wherein it's you read it, right, and you have no idea what you're reading, right? That's what happens because it's designed like a gadata to not be understood. You have to be, if you receive it from someone who received it from someone, etc. Well, then you'll understand it because then they'll explain to you. But if you just read it, it's gibberish.
Why
often.
did you not read it? You
I
weren't
don't know.
interested, or?
They never, we have a
40
policy. Yeah, the 40 thing. People like saying the 40 thing, but there's a policy. Well, there's a lot of history here. We launched the history lesson here, but Zohar was super popular in the 1500s. There was a calamity, probably the greatest calamity, well, save the Holocaust. I'm saying those kind of calamities, but the spiritual calamity that happened to Jewish people, in who knows, probably since the destruction of the Second Temple, was the false Messiah of Shabtai Tzvi. Shabtai Tzvi. And people believe, he claimed that he was the Messiah, and he did a lot of Kabbalah, was a super scholar, and he was, doing dubious things with Kabbalah and interpreting the Torah and changing things in the Torah, and he actually got enormous swaths of the Jewish people to believe that he was the Messiah, and they sold their houses and went to Israel. He eventually, on his way to Israel, stopped up in Turkey, converted to Islam, and, because the Sultan said, okay, either you convert to Islam or we chop your head off. So he says, okay, I'll convert to Islam. But then he said, no, I'm still the Messiah. This is all part of the test. And he had this great promoter, this guy Nathan of Gaza, and basically it tore the Jewish people apart. And it was chiefly as a result of Kabbalah. Since then, if someone made a big deal of Kabbalah, everyone was worried, oh no, Shabtai Tzvi. We had very bad experiences with people learning Kabbalah or teaching it wholesale or in the wrong hands. That's why, by the way, Lutzato, in the early 18th century, so he was also a really young scholar, also kind of the same prototype of Shabtai Tzvi somewhat, 20 years old, brilliant genius, super into Kabbalah, and just a remarkable character. And he was in Italy, that's where he's from. But they said, oh no, we've seen this before. This is already hundreds of years after Shabtai Tzvi. But the community says, we've seen this before, we don't like it, right? And they excommunicated him, they kicked him out of the city, and he moved to Israel, which is crazy, And even in the 18th century, the big titanic battles that existed between the Eibishitz and Emden controversy, where you had two of the chief rabbis of all of, or two of the foremost rabbis of the 18th century, had this enormous public battle where one of them claimed that the other one was a secret Sabbatean, which means still a follower of Shabtai Tzvi, even hundreds of years afterwards. And it tore apart the Jewish community. It was just a disaster. That's one of the reasons why today, Kabbalah is, I want to say it's shunned, but it's people are very wary of it. Another reason why people are wary of it is because of the Madonna Demi Moore thing, wherein people that know zero about Torah but are able to be spoon-fed some cute ideas that they could parrot over, but they don't even know what they're talking about. That's kind of a
play game.
Yeah, red screens. I actually said this once. I said, "Oh yeah, this red screen," and the guy's like, "You mean this?" He pulls out his red screen. Yeah, but it's just getting the surface. It's just taking things that are cutesy and nice, but not at all understanding what you're talking about.
Michael Berg is the guy that.
Yeah,
is
Michael and Karen,
Yeah.
his wife. Yeah, the Kabbalah Center. Either way, it's
So there is, it's just curious, so there is no, in order to become a rabbi, with all the courses y'all have to take, you don't have to take anything on Kabbalah if you don't want to?
No, nothing in Kabbalah, and Kabbalah is best left to the people that are already at the advanced stage of knowing all of Talmud. Like if you know all of Talmud, all of it, that's a lot. Not many people know. Like maybe, one of every 1,000 scholars knows all of Talmud. Then there's room to talk. But
That's disappointing because I think Kabbalah is fascinating.
It is
and
fascinating.
I read lots on it.
Okay. Well, the Talmud's fascinating also.
Have we excommunicated anybody lately?
No. But Maimonides himself writes this. He says, the first 4 chapters, he calls it the Paradise, which is the orchard. He says, this is what's most important. But first finish everything else, and then come back here, and then do this, So yes, no one's arguing as to the importance of it and how it's central to our religion, and we have a lot of core beliefs that are that were just organized and crystallized with Kabbalah. Of course, Rabbi Shimon is held, like I said, the author, according to the tradition of the Zohar, is one of the major characters. He's the father of Rabbi Eliezer, and no one's doubting it. The point is that there's a great danger of mass proliferation, mass dissemination of Kabbalah.
Was Maimonides versed in Zohar?
Oh wow, that is one of the best questions that has ever been asked. Because this is the subject.
You're it today.
It's the subject of enormous debate whether or not Maimonides was versed in Kabbalah. It seems on the surface that he was not, or at least he didn't use that to influence some his writings, because we know that he's a rationalist and very much into that kind of thought. So it seems on surface level that he was not working through the prism of Kabbalah, especially with books like A Guide to the Perplexed, which is a reflection of Jewish life, Jewish philosophy, Jewish understanding, Jewish law, Jewish practice, through the lens of Greek philosophy, very much antithetical to Zohar. That being said, so that's why that seems to be the most simple understanding, that Maimonides didn't have it or didn't use it.
Well, I thought Kabbalah wasn't into things until around the 15th century.
No, it wasn't out in the open. But the Ramban Nachmanides, who predated the discovery or dissemination of the Zohar in the public realm, he had Kabbalah for sure. It's clear. So even though he predated that, so Kabbalah existed beforehand. The question is, Maimonides have it? The simple answer is probably no. That seems to be the consensus. However, there are some pieces of evidence in Maimonides' own writings that he clearly had it. For example, Maimonides talks about someone who gets angry. And it says as follows, which is Hebrew. And it means someone who gets angry, it's as if they commit idolatry. And he says, this is what our rabbis told us. Which he's saying, this is referenced in the Talmud. However, if you scour the Talmud, beginning to end, top to bottom, right to left to right, upside down, diagonally, you won't find it. However, if you open the Zohar, you do find those words. That seems to be a very strong indication that maybe he had it in his edition of the Talmud. I'm saying there's a lot of debate about this, scholarly debate about that.
I'm not trying to go off in different directions, just what you said intriguing. You're saying anger, there's some sort of thing in the Kabbalah that says anger is tantamount to idolatry?
That's right. Why?
So
because
it's against Jewish...
no, idolatry, not adultery. Idolatry.
But are you saying it's against Jewish law to be angry? Ever angry?
To be angry or to act upon your anger, is that the question?
Well, even acting upon your, I mean, is the Lord can be angry, maybe the
Well, it
Lord's
seems,
anger was
no,
kindled
but there's
against
other
the-
sources, even in the Talmud, you don't have to go to the Zohar, that talk about anger, and it's a very negative thing. Because when someone's angry, well, anger is linked with arrogance, because I'm only angry because I think I'm better than someone else, or, no one else should have their way. If someone cuts me off, I get angry, right? How do you cut me off, right? It's linked with feeling superior and thinking less of the other person. And it's also ignoring God, because if you think less of someone else, well, then you think that you're all it, then well, what do you mean? You're a product of the Almighty. So that's what it says. It's taking you down the steps, that someone who's angry at a certain element of their actions and their behavior, well, then they're ignoring God.
Anger, but sin not. You can get angry, all right, incensed at this or that, the other thing, the Holocaust or something like that, this or that action, whatever. You can get angry, but sin not. That's what it says.
When it says to burn the evil from your midst.
Yeah, well, to
I
be
mean, I
angry.
guess you could do that without being angry necessarily, but won't it be more effective if you have?
Yeah. Well, and then the Talmud says in Yoma 41, called him out. I'll say it in English. There's no one here who speaks Hebrew, right? Any natural Hebrew speaker? Every Talmud Chacham, every Torah scholar that does not revenge and avenge like a snake or a serpent is not a Torah scholar.
Okay,
So it means obviously there's a time and place for it. That, like you said, the Holocaust or evil, we don't believe in accepting that. We don't believe in that, in condoning evil. Absolutely not. So what does it mean that anger is a bad thing? Well, not that kind of anger. Anger that's rooted in bad character is a negative anger. Either way, that's to answer your question. Did Maimonides have Kabbalah is a subject of fascinating, and I would say it's beyond the scope of this discussion because I don't know anything about it. That's the true answer.
Rabbi Wilbur, so bottom line is the great yeshivas, they actively discourage students.
They don't study it.
I mean, to avoid the schism, right? A possibility of the schism.
No, it's not just that. It's not appropriate. It's appropriate. It's best suited for someone who knows all of Talmud.
Yeah, like if you look, the way I've always kind of understood it is if you looked at your study and your spirituality like a house, like you're building a house, like lay your foundation and build your frame before you put in stained glass windows. And Torah is your foundation, Talmud is your frame, and Kabbalah is the stained glass window or the skylight.
Or it's something you don't even need. It's like one of those little.
I mean, nobody needs a stained glass window. It's beautiful. It's interesting,
right.
But nobody needs it.
You need windows.
Right, but you don't need beautiful windows.
Yes, that's a nice, beautiful window.
You
I like that. That's good.
You can have plain windows. You can have a plain glass window, or it's beautiful. It's fascinating. There's value to it, but it's not essential.
Yeah, I like that. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's Rabbi Shimon, his father, and Rabbi Eliezer is his son. Now, we know that Hadrian, our old nemesis, he made a ban against Torah study. And he said, whoever studies Torah gets executed. And we know many, many, many great rabbis at that time got executed. Now, Rabbi Shimon, he didn't hear about it. He kept on studying Torah. And they said, okay, they put out a warrant for his execution, so to speak. So he went with his son, Rabbi Eliezer, and he hid in a cave. Now, if anyone knows the story of him in the cave, they spent 12 years in the cave. And Talmud says that there was a miracle, that a stream of water and a carob tree sprouted, and they ate the carobs and drank the water, and they were submerged in sand to their necks and studied Torah for 12 years. And after 12 years, they hear this announcement. Someone was walking around announcing, Hadrian died, you come out. So they all come out, and what do? And imagine they spent 12 years in a cave studying Torah, just them, And I'm pretty sure that the tradition has it that they were studying Kabbalah. So imagine 12 years in a cave studying Kabbalah, and you come out and see the rest of the world. So what do? They see a guy on his field, working in the field. So Rabbi Shimon says to him, I don't get it. Like, these people are abandoning the eternal world and wasting their time with the transient world, with the passing world. So he looks at him, and then the guy's field just goes up in flames. And everywhere he's looking, everything's going up in flames. So then he hears this prophetic voice. He says, Did you guys come out of the cave to destroy the world? Get back to the cave. So they go back to the cave. 12 months later, and it adds over here, 12 months later, which corresponds to the 12 months of purgatory. Interesting. And then they hear another prophecy that okay, you could come out, and fine. They're walking and they see a guy. It was Friday afternoon. A guy's running around with 2 flowers. And they say to him, "Why do you have 2 flowers?" He says, for Shabbat. He says, "Shabbat, well, why do you have 2 flowers? Just have 1." So he says, no, because there's one mitzvah of remembering Shabbat and one of observing Shabbat. One zachor and one shamor. So he said, the world still there's still hope for humanity, and fine, they calm down. That's the story. This is the personality. This is someone who clearly had little tolerance for people not being robustly replete with Torah. Clearly.
So was it Shabbat when it came out the first time and the man was working in the field?
It doesn't say that. No. He was just working in his field. The guy's like, you're wasting your time. You waste your time just making food. We had a carob tree sprout up for us. You don't need to worry about that. The Almighty will take care of you. Yeah, clearly that was their attitude, and we see this again over here. And it doesn't seem to be like it doesn't seem like it's any. It seems like it's not a coincidence. Rabbi Eliezer, the son of Rabbi Shimon, these were people that were living on a different world. Now, let's look a little bit more deeply at how the Talmud describes the scene.
Before you do that.
Yes, go ahead.
Was this incident with the donkey supposed to happen before or after the cave?
I assume it happened afterwards.
Because then he hasn't really learned anything.
Well, he's not setting the guy's field on fire. That's.
I guess that's a...
Yeah. Okay, that's a good question. I don't know. That's a good question.
What's the significance of 12?
12 months or 12 years?
12.
I don't know. That's a good question.
Because
Because we find that elsewhere. It's another good pattern. We find it for Rabbi Akiva. He went to study for 12 years. Another one of the rabbis went for 12 years. I don't know. That's a good question.
For 12 years, but
Plus 12 months. Well, 12 months it says. 12 months it says that is the amount of time that someone could spend in the Jewish idea of Gehenna, right? Which is a maximum of 12 months. That's what it says. I don't know what the significance of that is. Why should that be the amount of time that they have to spend there? I don't know. That's a good question. But maybe the 12 year, it's the simplest answer is that it just happens to be that 12 years after they got there, the Caesar died. I don't know.
That's an unrealistic.
Yeah, it doesn't seem. Yeah, or maybe there's something to it. That's a good question. That's the right kind of attitude. Okay, so to ask those kind of questions, let's go back to the setting here. So we're told about Rabbi Eliezer, so we know about him. He's clearly someone with very low tolerance for emptiness, and he's coming from Migdal Gedor. Migdal Gedor. This would be a lot sweeter if you guys understood Hebrew. Maybe we have to have the Hebrew class. Now it tells us where he's coming from, so maybe it's just telling us this, where in Israel they are, or where in the world they are, or maybe it's insignificant. But if you know Hebrew, the word Migdal means a tower, and Gedor means a fence. So maybe that's just the name of the town that he's coming from. And then you would just have a question. Okay, well, how does it add to the story to tell us where he was coming from? Doesn't seem to add to the story. Plus, the city itself has a very unique name. It's a tower of a fence tower fence, right? Perhaps this is one, and the Maharal, one of the commentators, says a tower. So a tower is a skyscraper, right? That's aloof, right? That's up in the air. That would seem very much in sync.
Ivory tower. The idea that you're an intellectual and you're, very full of yourself, and it ties in with kind of elitism and being aloof.
It is.
Yeah.
So we have here, elitist.
There you go.
What was the name of the tower in the Lord of the Rings? And it had a big wall around it too.
Well, there you go.
And the fence could be like a separation.
Plagiarism.
Well, with an army of orcs.
Yeah.
The fence
So-
separates him from.
Yeah, maybe that guy was an orc.
What it's telling us, perhaps,
Ugly, right?
Building a fence around it.
Yeah.
perhaps it's telling us. So one of the commentators points out, says this is a strange name. This is not a regular name of a city. It says Migdal Tower. Why? Because he had haughtiness. He felt aloof. But where did that come from? It came from the Torah study. And we can say a fence. The idea of a fence goes very well with Torah, as we know, because what does the Torah do? It makes someone separate. It makes it distinct. It means he's not a member of society. He stood in the cave. He was in the cave for 12 years studying. He was fenced out. He was like separated. He was elitist on one hand, and he was distinct, and he wasn't a man of the people. He didn't know what everyone was going through. He's separated. There's a fence between him and everyone else. So that was his condition, and that's just a reality. And the Torah is telling us, you should know, this is a natural consequence of someone who studies Torah. When someone studies Torah, there's a trade-off, so to speak. Number one, you're going to be elevated. You're studying the Almighty's Torah. How could you not walk out and feel great about it? But there's a danger to feeling great about that. Why? Because what happens when you see the other guy? You see someone else and you say, it's wasted his time. Right? This is empty one. This is someone who's so ugly, someone who's so void of this greatness. So yes, it's a wonderful thing, but the Talmud perhaps is telling us that it's very important for you to realize that studying Torah is a necessity. However, together with every stage of growth in Torah, there ought to be a parallel stage of growth in humility. Why? Because otherwise you'll be this great tower, but you'll be separate from everyone. And you know what it looks like? It looks like someone like Rabbi Eliezer who made a big mistake, and he himself realized it. And he says, you know what? Be like a reed. What happens to a reed? So all that pointed out. As a reed grows, it curls over more. So the more it grows, the more humility it has.
Yeah.
As opposed to the cedar that goes straight up. And telling us this is all telling us that every stage of growth that we have to have in our Torah has to be accompanied by a growth in humility. Noel.
I was just going to say, and he also said that something like the quill will remind you of this. So when you're writing with the quill, you're just remembering that you shouldn't be aloof, that you shouldn't be separated.
And perhaps he's saying that this is writing the Torah, that the Torah has to be encased in an individual who is humble. Finds again, who delivered us the Torah? Moses. Who was the most humble man that ever lived? Moses. And we know that there's lots of parallels between humility and Torah greatness. Why? Because that is the most perfect vessel for housing Torah is humility. And that's what it's making, and it's pointed out to Rabbi Eliezer, and he himself realized it, which I think is important for us before we go on in castigating him. It's very clear that the Torah, the Talmud does tell us this negative story about him, but it also tells us that he got it. And what did he do immediately after the story happened? It clicked. He got it. He's like, oh, that's you have to be soft like a reed. I made that mistake, and hopefully he'll rectify that.
And our prayer book says something about growing tall like the cedars in Lebanon.
Arzei Lebanon, yeah. And the cedars of Lebanon are those are the majestic trees. But in fact, another ironic irony is that the forefathers are compared to cedars by Bilam, and that's just the next source. We'll get to it hopefully. We still have a lot more to do in this source. And the temple was compared to a cedar. So very interesting how cedar seems to be shunned.
There.
Yes. Okay, so what's the next thing we find out about? So he's traveling from Migdal Gedor from the house of his teacher. Telling us, it's not just telling us the town, it's telling us the condition. What's the next thing we find out about him? He was traveling on what kind of animal? So was it a horse? Was it a carriage? Was it who cares? Let's say it was a horse. What does it matter? Let's say he was walking. Why is it significant to tell that he was traveling on a donkey?
Does the
Because
donkey
they're stubborn.
represent
Because
materialism?
he just behaved like an ass.
They're renowned to be
I like
stubborn
that.
animals. they're renowned history.
Okay, so Dan, what do you say? Say it again.
I thought you told me in the past it represents materialism, because
the word chamor and homer, donkey in all of Jewish literature is compared to materialism. In fact, the body, according to the Torah, has 248 limbs. That's how the demarcation of the limbs of the body. And the gematria of chamor, of donkey, also the word homer, which is the same word, just different inflection, which means materialism, is also 248. So he was traveling with a donkey. But what does it say about him? Was he traveling with the donkey?
He was traveling on the donkey.
He was on the donkey. Who else do we know
I was thinking the same thing.
Jesus.
that travels on a donkey?
Jesus?
Mashiach. Mashiach, very good.
Balaam.
Bilam, excellent.
So was I wrong with what I just said?
What'd you say?
Jesus.
Oh, I don't know. I'm not familiar. Is that right? He traveled on a donkey?
Yes.
But isn't there something
In Jewish sources.
in
In
our
Jewish sources.
scriptures where it says the Messiah will be on a donkey?
Yes, so that's Dan pointed out. Now, but Bilam traveled with the donkey, but it's very important to remember the donkey was on was parallel level with it. He had a conversation with it. He had a dialogue with the donkey. He wasn't on top of the donkey. He had a dialogue. In fact, we're told in the Talmud.
Well, he was riding it. When
Take
it
this.
talked
He was
to
riding it, okay, but
Yeah.
he wasn't on the donkey because it means on as in superior to the donkey.
Okay.
We're also told in the Talmud that he used to sleep with his donkey. He clearly, he's not being presented as someone who is on the donkey. In fact, we have three people besides Rabbi Eliezer in Jewish literature that travel on donkeys. One of them is Messiah. Who else knows what the other two are? Abraham, Moses. Clearly, these are three sluggers in the Jewish world. You know, Abraham, Moses, and Messiah. They share a commonality that they travel on a donkey.
So what are you getting at?
Okay. So let's get to this. Now, well, let's just talk about these three people. So Abraham, Moses, and Messiah. What's their roles in? Let's give it a nice spin. What are the roles of Abraham, Moses, and Messiah in Tikkun Olam? What's their significant role in Jewish history? Abraham, of course, he was the first. But what idea is he bringing to the world? Monotheism. Excellent. Moses, what did he do with the idea of monotheism? What did he propel? He is the father of the nation, so to speak. He gave the Torah, which made monotheism a mainstay of the Jewish people. Thus, the idea of God before Abraham, for Abraham, it's not known to anyone. Abraham comes, now the idea is in the world. Abraham introduced the idea of monotheism to the world. Moses takes that idea and brings it to the nation. What does Messiah do?
Brings it to the world.
Brings it to the world. Exactly. Thus, Abraham, Moses, and Messiah are three parts of a process of fixing the world entirely. Abraham gets it started. Moses brings it to Judaism, to the Jewish people who are going to bring it to the rest of the world, and Messiah is going to be the clincher, right? Clincher to finish that all. We're told about these three people, they all travel on top of the donkey. What's the significance? Perhaps we could say the significance of it is that a donkey is we said, it's materialism. In order for someone to become great in Jewish life, they have to become superior masters over the physical. The idea of God, what's that? It's a very spiritual idea. What is the greatest hamper and obstacle preventing someone from achieving that? Their homer, their inner donkey, so to speak, their inner animalistic side. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Abraham, of course, as well, but Abraham, Moses, and Messiah, they are such masters that they are entirely separate, and they're on top of that. To them, they have a separation of their physical and who they are. They're completely in charge, completely in control of their physical. Entirely. And that's how they're successful. That's why we're told these are the examples of people riding on donkeys. Because these are the ones who are the greatest individuals, thus the conduits to achieving these great ends. Yeah.
So is Eliezer making this parallel himself, or the Talmud is telling us this? making this connection?
Well, it seems like Rabbi Eliezer is not someone to sneeze at. He is on top of the donkey. He's on top. He is in total mastery of his physicality.
So this
However,
is an
what's
idea-
missing?
So this is an idea presented to us by the Talmud, or this is?
This is
Rebbe Eliezer?
which the idea of the donkey?
No. This parallel of him to Abraham and Moses.
Well,
and
that's us
Isaiah.
analyzing the Talmud, but it's not. The commentators on the Talmud have done that.
What's missing is his humility.
Huh?
His
That's
humility.
what I'm asking. Like, did he elevate himself to that?
Well, he got there.
Or-
He got there, probably via his behavior, his Torah study, his dedication. However, he was not Abraham. What's Abraham renowned for? What's the Abraham is kindness. Abraham is the leadership. Abraham is the one who had the heart for everyone. Abraham had more than just dominance over his physicality, but he also had the other crucial element of leadership, which is acceptance of others and tolerance of others. And welcoming others, and even people that, like we said, he meets the 3 idolaters, and what does he do? He brings them in. He courted the people that were empty and brought them aboard, and that's what Rabbi Eliezer was missing. But on an individualistic side, means from himself and his personal character and he had control and dominance of his physicality. Absolutely, he was on a donkey. And when you say riding on a donkey in the Jewish literature, you're saying a lot. You're not just telling us his mode of transportation. You're telling us his mode of living. You're telling us his dominion that he had over his body. Okay, then we say he's riding the edge of the river. So this one I couldn't figure out. He's traveling on the edge of the river. That's such a... Talmud's not saying that, that's not saying it to us. Oh, well, where he was traveling, there's something to it.
And what does a river symbolize?
I don't know, tell me.
I don't know.
I'm
one who
still
knows.
open-ended question.
Water is
Time,
life.
time.
It feeds the crops.
Flow.
Because it was a desert area, a river would have been something that brought wealth, it was something to be highly valued. So that he was happy, he was in a good mood, he was feeling on top of the world, traveling by the water source. That would have been a good thing.
Well, water represents Torah, right?
Okay.
And he was on the edge, so he's on at this lofty place, or the edge between the spirituality and the material world, because of his Torah study.
No, don't stop. Well, so you're saying maybe that he was used to being in the water. So he's used to studying Torah, and now he suddenly got... Maybe that's what... That's not bad. Something like that. Like, hey, he's not used to this kind of environment. Like, he spent the 12 years or 13 years in the cave, and he just came from his house of study. Who knows how many years he spent there. And he's always been in the water. And now he got out of his comfort zone, and look what it brought to him. He wasn't ready. He was at the edge of the water. He had just left the water. I don't know, maybe, I don't know, we just came with this now. Thanks, Dan. He was in the water. He was used to being in the water. That's what he was comfortable with. That's what he would have been fantastic with. He got out of his environment and actually got himself in trouble.
So is there an analogy then that they were up to water in their necks in the cave?
Well, they were up in sand.
Excuse me, in sand. I'm sorry, I thought you said water.
There was the water, the little spring of water that came next to them. I don't know. I don't know. This is a good question. Okay. So he was very happy and he felt very good about himself. And the guy says, empty ones. He calls him empty one. Like I said, I think when it says empty one, it's clearly referencing the fact that he was empty of Torah. And I want to argue also maybe that he was so ugly, perhaps it was ugly also in character. It seems like, according to Rabbi Eliezer, the only thing that's going to appear on his purview is someone's character. Someone's righteousness, someone's dedication towards spiritual endeavors. I think so. And that's what he said to him, well, why are you so ugly? It's funny. Why are you so ugly? I have one of my grandmothers. She's like, she grew up in Romania and Hungary. She's like a 95-year-old hilarious woman, my mother's mother. But every time I see her, she says, why are you so ugly? so ugly. It's her joke. That she, like by my wedding, she went up to my wife and went over to Chaya and said to her, I don't know what you saw in him. I don't know. So it always reminds me of, like, why are you so ugly?
But he's clearly looking past the physicality, he's looking at the.
That's what I would think. I think that's a good argument. And what does the guy tell him?
But how can he know his character if he just met him?
I don't know. That's another good
I
question.
agree, I have a hard time thinking it's not his physical thing. He meets him for the first time, they clearly have not had an exchange, except that the man tells the rabbi, you know, how wonderful, how does he language it?
Peace be unto you.
Peace be unto you. How,
That shows some
it shows
character.
some character and a level of respect that he's willing to give another.
How
He's
can you
also willing
respond
to
to
forgive
him?
him. If he changes his ways.
How can he respond to him?
How can you respond to him that the Almighty made him ugly?
Yes,
Does
but
it
he can
make
show some
people
type
ugly in sin, like in character?
Everybody else has to have.
If that
That's a good
was-
question.
I think
If,
so.
if it was a spiritual ugliness, could he respond to him? How can you go to the one that made me ugly in character?
That's a good question. If it was ugly in character, then it doesn't seem like his response is fair. Well, let's work it a piecemeal here. So he says to him, "Is everyone in your town so ugly?"
Yeah, I can understand
Well,
that.
maybe he's saying, you know, it's just an ugly town.
Yeah.
Like, or maybe he's saying,
You have a corrupt village.
yeah, you're in a town that maybe no one studies Torah or no one is involved, and that's your environment, that's your surroundings. And what if the guy comes with the zinger of all zingers? He tells him, go talk to
Go
God.
tell the man who made me,
Uh,
go
the-
tell the craftsman.
The craftsman. We find in the Mishnah, in the chapters of the Fathers, we find the following lesson when it says that if you study a lot of Torah, don't consider yourself so great, because that's why you were created. You know, and if you have a lot of Torah and someone else does not have a lot of Torah, don't feel better than them, because, well, if you have so much, well, then you're judged at a much higher degree of, you know, culpability. As opposed to someone else, well, not so.
So like John F. Kennedy, to whom much is given, much is
Yes,
expected? Is
yes,
that where we're
yes, yes. So,
Did he say that?
going? Yeah,
I think it was also Bible or something.
it may be.
As long as
Well-
you're talking about going back to Cicero on a couple of things, so.
maybe the answer, I think the question is a good question, and it does seem to indicate from his response that it was more of like an external. But maybe he's saying like this, you know what, the craftsman who made me, anyone who the Almighty makes has a soul and has something beautiful about them and something admirable about them. And in fact, we find out in the Talmud, in the Mishnah, it says, who is the wise man? He who learns from everyone. Because everyone has something to contribute, right? Because that's the way the Almighty designed it, right? The Almighty made everyone individually. Everyone looks different. Everyone has some different personality. Everyone's different. And everyone is handcrafted by the Almighty. So when someone says, oh, you have nothing to offer, you're empty and you're ugly, nothing to contribute, nothing to learn from, well, even someone who's not entirely righteous, there's still something to learn from. So essentially what Rabbi Eliezer was saying is that no, the Almighty made something that there's nothing admirable about, no redeeming quality.
Not only that, but he is also suggesting that everybody in that man's city is equal to the man.
Well, he's asking. It's kind of weird because he asks, is everyone in your city so ugly? He's saying maybe that's why you don't have that same character. And he says, well, I don't know, which is the best response ever.
But, you know, you taught that class on love your neighbor.
Yeah.
About the treasure chest, got a bunch of rotten fruit in it, but there's some diamonds in there.
There's
You know,
always
all the
something redeeming.
diamonds, He was just looking at the rotten fruit, not looking at the diamonds.
Yeah, but maybe to answer your question, the diamond comes from the Almighty. You know, because the Almighty makes everyone's soul different. Everyone's character has something good about them. It's impossible to be entirely. Well, it's unlikely to be entirely corrupt. So that's that. You know, the whole reed and cedar thing. So it seems like I want to just point out once again to Rabbi Eliezer's credit, he takes his lesson to heart, and it's a lesson that it's in the Talmud, and I think it's probably most appropriate for people who make efforts to grow, that they're likely to face this great obstacle. I think of, I had a friend of mine. I was studying this with one of my students, recently married. So I said to him, well, what's going to happen? Are you going to get home? And you're going to look at your wife and says, I just spent an hour and a half with the rabbi studying Talmud. What did you do? Like that, he's like, that's exactly what my attitude's going to be. Just look at me. I just study. It's like a knee-jerk reaction. The automatic result of someone working on their character, on their behavior, studying Torah, whatever it may be, that they automatically are there's a tendency to look down on someone else who does not do that. It's like when you go on a diet, right? And then you're pushing your cart through the store and you see someone like there by the candy section, like loading up their cart. Like it's very hard to not judge them because look at me, I'm on the diet. Like look at you, And the Torah is telling us, hey, Rabbi Eliezer is a great scholar, right? But he went through the challenge that faces many scholars. In fact, probably all of them. Where in every stage of growth is another reason to be arrogant, another reason to look down at the next guy. Especially you're the top, you're the top of the tower, right? You're on top of the skyscraper, and you see some lowly dude at the bottom. It's very hard to say this person has something to teach me, right? So, and then it clicks to him, and he gets off the donkey, right? And he prostrates himself. He lowers himself. He's, I'm not on the donkey anymore. I don't want to be on the donkey. He lowers himself and starts asking forgiveness, right? It clicked to him. He got it. He got the message, and then after he finally secured his forgiveness, he went and taught this lesson for all time. He himself, he says, I'm a victim of this. I overcame it, and you Torah scholars who are reading this, you also should make sure that be flexible like a reed and not stiff like a cedar.
It is interesting in the story that the people of the city do the exact same thing to the rabbi that the man singularly.
What'd they do to him?
They all go out and greet him, Rabbi, Rabbi. So the man wasn't really very different than the other people in the city.
And
they all greeted him with the same
adulation,
respect.
Yes, respect.
And
so.
I wonder if they were all so ugly. Did we find that? Doesn't say.
It doesn't say, but it does suggest that their hearts were in the same place as the man by himself.
Mm-hmm. So anyhow, that's a very interesting piece of Talmud. I think what we do see is an example of how every word has meaning, and it's it paints a very vivid picture, but it's not just to just tantalize our imagination, but it's also to teach us a lesson.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
This, what you just said, this every word has a meaning. Now, this meaning, in your opinion or in the opinion of other scholars, was it built into this layer of meaning one after another by the writer of this parable, or later on people start reading it and say, okay, wait a second, donkey means this. And
no, these ideas are very, very well established. Very well established. But
so when it was written, it was designed already to
find
of hidden meanings.
Yeah, the meanings are covered, but there's so many examples of it that it's abundantly clear that it's not. You're not just working backwards, especially when you find different puzzle pieces across the Talmud, which is remarkable. Like I remember another episode. The source, where 3 different places in the Talmud it says it's like you get a third and a third and a third, and it's another way to ensure that only someone who is well versed in the Talmud will actually get that. Think about it. If you wanted to hide code, in a book, well, you want only someone who reads the entire book to know. So what would you do? You put hints everywhere, but not anywhere one place overtly. Right? You wouldn't blatantly write it, you would hide it. The Talmud wants sometimes only super scholars to get the lesson.
So it's like a Da Vinci Code, right?
But why? I mean, why learning lessons about humility and being kind?
Why do you need to hide?
Why hide that?
Well, I don't think this one is not so. I think we could have come out with a lesson even if we just read it. But we learn a lot more about the reasonings for it. And I think there's other places in the Talmud that says the same lesson. So I don't think this one is something which had to be hidden so intently. But some of the more philosophical, less behavioral ones, because it's not meant for everyone. It's not designed for everyone. I've said this before, I'll say it again. The Talmud doesn't dispense secrets like gumballs. It's not something that you just sit back and relax and you have to toil over it. It wants you to earn it,
But it's designed for an advanced scholar, this advanced learner, whereas vast majority of Jewish population, your cobblers, your money changers, your butchers, they wouldn't get it.
Yeah, but we have.
Why do that?
We're a nation of scholars. Don't underestimate the Jews. We've been for thousands of years. Think about that. Which document do we have today in the entire world today to study more than the Talmud?
Yeah. No,
Nothing.
I understand.
And the Talmud's thousands of years old. It's remarkable. So it does have lasting power, and there's been millions of Jews throughout the centuries that have poured over the Talmud. This has been the lifeblood of the Jewish people.
But your peasant, your soldier, Jewish soldier, right?
Yeah.
Your, I don't know, like a regular guy
So
who has to go about earning money for his life, which is, again, the vast majority of people. Yes, they are obviously literate, obviously they study Torah, but not to that extent to notice that a donkey is not really a donkey.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could have read this story many times, and I'm not sure I would have ever understood on a donkey, the significance of on the donkey. I would have probably never gotten that one.
And there is no point, it's not a secret wisdom that has to be hidden from enemies, right? That is universal wisdom.
Yeah, but is your question, I think there's two ways to ask your question. I think is your question, hey, what about those people? How do we get them to have vibrant Judaism? Is that the question? Or the question is, how do they not get the Talmud?
The first one.
The first one.
Yeah.
So you essentially invented Hasidism. That's exactly the rationale behind Hasidut. The rationale is that there came a point in time where a great many of the Jews were not able to gain and glean the same sort of vibrancy and vitality from the Talmud as in scholarship and wisdom. That's what the Jewish people always valued. That, like I said, Talmud, the greatest insult is to be an empty one, right? That's what we always valued. Those were, high society were always the more learned and more wisdom-oriented people. Well, you have a generation where people are, more simple, more peasants. And that's what happened. In the 18th, 19th centuries, it was a low point for Jewish exceptionalism is always there, and you always have great Jewish intellects. Even the aforementioned Karl Marx was Jewish, right? Despite the fact he was baptized. But Jews always excelled, but there was a significant portion of the population that they weren't as involved in the study, and they were kind of left out. So the originators of Hasidism, they developed a philosophy or a movement that stressed the more simple and ingestible parts of Judaism, made that the forefront of, thus, prayer, and thus having a Rebbe, the idea of having a Rebbe. So you have, let's say, one designated guy, and he'll teach and inspire others. The idea of community and unity, and getting together and having a wonderful meal and lots of arak and vodka and potato kernel, We're inspiring the people with the things that are more ingestible for the regular dude.
Like a shtetl-based Judaism.
Yes, and that was the idea, and it saved Judaism because.
Go ahead. Well, I'm just going to say, if you practice Judaism and this, I realize my wording is going to mess this up, but I'm going to say it anyway. If you practice Judaism genuinely at a very basic level, you're going to spend Friday night with rabbis and scholars talking about the Torah and talking about the Talmud. You're going to spend 20-something hours every Shabbat. You're going to be not working. You're going to be sitting in the synagogue or sitting at somebody's house with people who know more than you studying this. And so even the average cobbler stops work for 25 hours every week and focuses on study, which is much more study than the average Joe who's not practicing traditional Judaism would ever learn.
But
And so it's not
Chassidut-
like it's inaccessible knowledge.
Right,
Like
but
you lived
Chassidut
there.
institutionalized it. That's what they did. They institutionalized it. They made it the thing. And you know what? Like, no one's going to argue in hindsight that despite it being super controversial and all the bans and all the excommunication and all the bad blood that happened at the onset of Hasidism in the 18th century, no one's going to argue in hindsight that Jewish people today would not be what we are, would not have survived and thrived to this extent if not for that movement. So yes, that was done, and it was addressed by the great leaders of the time. Okay, that's that. We have. I went over to look at the other piece of Talmud. This will be on your own. I think that's another link in the chain of trying to understand this idea of a reed and a cedar. We find in the Talmud where it compares the blessing of Bilam to the curse of Achia Hashiloni. One of them gave a blessing, and one of them gave a curse, but the curse was more preferable, because the curse was the curse the Jewish people like to be like a reed, and the blessing was the curse to be like a cedar. And it's clearly this parallel, the comparison of a reed and a cedar. And it says some more details about how a cedar is able to withstand all the tumultuous winds, wherein a cedar is uprooted. And then it has an addendum, and it has a very similar addendum, but not quite the same. So I wanted to look at that, and maybe if anyone has anything interesting to share about that, email me or whatever. But that's that, guys. It was lovely, lots of fun as usual. I apologize once again for being late. I will try to not do that again. But I appreciate everyone. Once again, tons and tons of fun. And have a wonderful rest of your Sunday. And everyone, rest of your week. Yes, go ahead.
Were you born in New York?
Yes.
Well, that's very interesting, because my mother was born in New York. And the one thing I could never break her from saying was donkey instead of donkey. And she said, look, it's monkey, why can't it be donkey?
Wait, so how do you say it? You say
donkey.
And how do I say donkey?
Donkey. Donkey.
I don't know, my kids make fun of me. I say water. I say like they say water. And I say water. And coffee. And they say coffee.
It always tickles me.
It's, yeah.
We worked the heck out of that donkey, didn't we?
Donkey. It's so subtle. Donkey. It probably this is like it's like fingers scratching chalkboard.
My wife.
Some people, when you hear.
My wife always says donkey and monkey.
Monkey and monkey, yeah. But not in the South.
Contemporaneous evidence that he ever lived.
Not in the South.
There was no evidence from his
Listen to the